Greetings. Welcome to the Dr. J Vlog series. It's Wednesday, February 26th, 2025. And on Wednesdays, we consider emotional well-being and relationships. So I'd like to start today by talking a little bit about health. Have you ever been sick, physically quite sick, quite ill? High fever, aches and pains, maybe unable to get out of bed for a few days? Most of us can recall at least one or two occasions where we've been seriously ill. And at the same time, we know just how awful and how painful that can be, so that when we get well again, we feel so much better. There have been many periods, probably for many of us, where we've gone for years perhaps without a serious illness. We may have had a cough or a cold or what have you, but I'm talking about something that truly impedes our ability to function on a daily basis. So, and similarly, we might get physically injured from time to time, right? Just from doing chores around the house, or spraining an ankle, playing basketball, or tennis elbow, or plantar fasciitis if you're a runner. You're always hoping to recover quickly from those injuries, especially when you're younger. You imagine, of course, that you'll always be able to recover, and the sooner the better. Well, what's even more remarkable is the fact that according to the Canadian Pain Task Force, which was established in 2019, roughly 7.6 million Canadians experience chronic pain, or just about 1 in 5 of all Canadians. The International Association for the Study of Pain defines pain as an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience associated with or resembling that associated with actual or potential tissue damage. And for most people, of course, the pains that we encounter, that we experience, are acute, they're temporary, they're typically the body's way of warning us that something's wrong, that something has to be addressed, some part of our body. But when pain persists for 3 months or longer, that's referred to as chronic pain. It can be primary chronic pain, which is the form of pain that persists even after the tissue healing has finished, and maybe there's no longer any identifiable cause, or chronic secondary pain, which occurs in association with the underlying diseases that people experience, like rheumatoid arthritis, that sort of thing. So, do you acknowledge that you've been sick physically, or that you've experienced some type of serious pain associated with a physical injury at some point, maybe on multiple occasions in your life? Almost certainly you'd answer yes. And so what's the point, Dr. J, or shall we say Dr. Obvious? Don't be rude. But my point is that when we think about mental health challenges and issues, these are arguably just as common as physical health challenges, and yet less often acknowledged as such. It's difficult then to come up with exact numbers, but most people will experience better and worse periods of mental health throughout the course of their lives. But it's those people in particular who experience symptoms that are more severe, that are more persistent, and that impact their ability to function on a daily basis. These would be the types of mental illnesses or mental challenges that are often described as, by different diagnostic criteria, as occurring quite frequently and more commonly than you would imagine within the general population. So, whether or not you've had a mental illness or some kind of a disorder diagnosed formally or not, there's a very good chance that at some point in the course of your lifetime, you'll experience a mental health issue, if not a mental health crisis. So, mental disorders are characterized by disruptions in thinking and mood or behavior, and are associated with distress and impaired functioning. There are many different types of mental disorders, including mood disorders, anxiety disorders, post-traumatic stress disorders, schizophrenia, eating disorders, substance use disorders, and so on. And according to Statistics Canada, in the 2022 Mental Health and Access to Care Survey, nearly 1 in 5 Canadians aged 15 and older that's over 5 million, met the diagnostic criteria for a mood, anxiety, or substance use disorder. These figures include the roughly 7.5% who have experienced a major depressive symptom in the last 12 months, and the more than 2% who have bipolar disorder. So you're talking then about 1 in 10 Canadians, 15 and older, who are currently, or at least in a given year, experiencing quite serious mental health issues. Another 12% experience some type of generalized anxiety disorder or one or more social phobias. Another 5% struggling regularly with substance use disorders, and some other issues. So I'll drill down further into these and related mental health issues in a future vlog. But I wanted to express then the importance of acknowledging mental health issues and the fact that by most estimates, at least half of the population will experience a mental health issue or disorder by the time they're age 40. So these are big numbers, no matter how you slice it. And again, there are obviously continua here. There are variations in the extent of the seriousness of the illnesses, the extent of the impairments, and so forth. But these are obviously quite widespread in general across the entire population. So, and again, just speaking for myself, and I want to be clear about this, I've struggled, and I don't use that term lightly, but literally throughout, well, it almost seems like most of my life with battling certain mental health issues, especially when I was younger and in my 20s. And I struggled with severe anxiety issues and anger management issues and depression for quite a number of years. And yet I managed to appear relatively normal most of the time. And I had the good fortune of getting some good counseling on a few occasions, even psychiatric counseling on one occasion in particular. But here's the thing, I never really thought of myself as being mentally ill. That was always other people. And again, to probably 95% of the time or 95% of the people, I did seem to be normal and well-adjusted. But I still struggled, even after my 20s, into my 30s and 40s, with various anxiety and certain kinds of fears around certain people and so on. And anyways, long story short, the reason that I continued to struggle, again, mostly successfully, masking the symptoms or being able to manage things reasonably well, was that I suffered from something called complex post-traumatic stress disorder, complex or childhood PTSD. Who knew? I didn't. I thought I'd addressed through counseling and through hard work and reading and learning and doing meditation and through exercise, etc. I thought I'd addressed my more perplexing mental health issues. And yet there was always something wrong, or at least I always felt there was something wrong. So I started dealing with this in a much more systematic way once I had this comprehensive assessment, some really expert help and advice and diagnostics, and then started figuring out how to cope more effectively with the CPTSD. That was the core, at least speaking for myself, of my personal issues, my personal struggles. And so it's actually then quite true, at least again in my case, that I've only been really, truly, deeply, genuinely healthy for about the last 5 years. I can say I've been honestly a very well-adjusted and healthy person. Obviously not perfect by any stretch, but the point is that, well, I want to draw an important analogy between this notion of well-being after being physically quite sick. Again, that great feeling that you have when you're back to normal and you're back to your old self and you've got the energy back and you can do all the things that you're accustomed to doing. Well, again, in my case, I didn't really appreciate or fully realize the impact of complex PTSD or all the mechanisms that I had developed to cope quite effectively. But when I finally, truly, genuinely broke through, it was even way better than that feeling of being healthy again after being physically sick. In other words, for me, I never even realized just how much or how mentally healthy people could feel, how they would experience life on a day-to-day basis. I never knew what that was like, quite honestly, until I finally got there. And now I know. And I know I don't ever want to go back. Okay? But again, I don't look back on all of this with anger or sadness or remorse or self-centered misery, right? Again, I'm well aware that everybody has to go through the trials and tribulations that life has, and some obviously are much more serious than others, and some encounter, tragic circumstances that, again, for me are unimaginable. But there's no point in comparing ourselves with each other. It's what you've experienced. It's the issues, the life experiences that are part of your journey that, again, a lot of people cope with quite effectively, and they're well adjusted, and they're healthy and loving and caring, and all of the things that I would think most of us would aspire to be. And even many of those who have been hurt, who have struggled, who have suffered from debilitating illnesses, whether they be physical or mental in nature, have been able to sort of find that resiliency and become these incredible people. Okay? So don't ever give up in that sense, right? And so in my case, I figured what I would do then is simply put all of these decades of learning and knowledge building and try to give something back, right? I've been trying to do that through my decades of teaching and coaching, and then through all the research that I've published as well. So I've had outlets to be able to express myself and to try to give of the best parts of myself. But there's more wisdom now that I have that I didn't have previously, and that's what I'm trying to share through this lifetime of studying and reflecting and writing and so on and so forth, all these different elements that I've included in the vlog series. And that's really the core purpose. And that includes then my knowledge of mental health issues, emotional well-being, and the keys to building and maintaining successful relationships. And just as I talked earlier in a different vlog about some of the keys that parents could do to help ensure their children's healthy emotional well-being and nurturance and broader healthy child development, many of the same issues apply to adults as well, just in maybe a slightly different format or different ways of expressing them, okay? So in other words, the same mechanisms, by and large, work not only for children, but work for adults. So think of anybody in your life, anyone over the years, but especially now, think in terms even as an adult, who have given their love and their emotional support to you, have been there for you, perhaps quite selflessly, and who have stuck by you through the proverbial thick and thin, through your biggest struggles. And for that matter, maybe you've been that person who has been there for others or other adults in your life, not just your children, but maybe you've been there for your partner or other loved ones, or even a colleague at work, and you've given that support unconditionally. You've undoubtedly made a difference in their lives, just as others have done for you, for some of us. So what do I mean by what we should be doing then as adults to nurture that sort of healthy emotional well-being and so forth? Well, the adult version of reading to your children, which is one of the mechanisms I suggested in the other vlog that has these kind of, it's like a miracle cure for so much of what ails or hurts children, the parents reading to their children on a regular basis. Anyway, I described all of that in another vlog. But the adult version might be simply the idea of, well, just spending time together in conversation, in communication of some form or another, okay? Some serious thought and engagement with one another, but again, on a regular basis. And maybe that comes with the accompanying long walk or drive together, or just sitting together to watch a Netflix series on a regular, if not nightly basis. Then you might say, well, yeah, but that's great, but there are just times when I don't feel like it, right? I'm not in a good place. And I grant you, I get that. I still feel that way once in a while, not very often anymore, thankfully. But, sure, it happens. But my point is that even when, and especially when, you're in that place where you're struggling a bit, it's crucially important if you can either be that person for someone else or allow and trust that someone else to be there for you when you're struggling. That's what's going to make all the difference. Most of the time. Not always. I mean, there are times where some people, could be any of us, experience a serious mental health crisis, right? Just like somebody can suffer a serious, injury, breaking their leg or tearing their ACL or what have you, where you've got to have a much more serious and immediate intervention. I'm not talking about that, but most of the time, in most of our everyday lives, even when we're having a really bad day, and even when we're really struggling to keep it together, the interventions on the informal side can and often are quite enough, especially if you have that trusted person in your life and you've allowed yourself to trust that person to intervene, just like you trust the doctor to treat you, or you trust the pilot to get the plane, from one place to the other safely and so forth. We have to be willing to trust others with our emotional well-being. And by the way, if they, for whatever reason, break that trust, or they demonstrate that they're not worthy of that trust, well, then you have to make a decision about the relationship and move on. But again, I'm talking about nurturing healthy relationships here. And part of that falls on our shoulders and our willingness to trust others, just as we do in so many other spheres of our lives. And again, hopefully that's reciprocated. They displayed that they are trustworthy, etc. Okay, so I'm just talking about those contexts. But I think that's most of the people who are close to us in our lives, generally speaking, right? And so the other aspect, or another important aspect of that, is the I love you phrase. That dreaded I love you, those 3 words. I don't know why we've had such a stigma, or why, because people are afraid. What if I say I love you and you don't hear anything back, or the other person doesn't love us, right? Well, again, within the trust of certain relationships, and I'm not saying you have to walk up to strangers all the time and say, I love you. Well, not a bad thing, but again, maybe people will think you're suffering your own psychotic break or mental health issue, whatever the case may be. But I'm talking about, saying that I love you regularly and in a meaningful way to others who are important in your lives, right? And there's that same dynamic of physical contact and hugs as well. Even the hug-averse, believe it or not, need hugs from time to time. And by the way, I'm 100% serious. When I was articulating that thought in my head and starting to put it down in my notes, my hug-averse kitty cat, Lucy, my pishy Lucy, came up to me and started nuzzling this arm. She doesn't do that a lot, but she was pushing on my arm. She wanted a hug. See, even kitty cats that don't normally want to be touched or picked up want hugs sometimes. We all do. We all need them, even if we don't admit it. Anyway, so it's absolutely crucial that we be willing to express that love both verbally and, as appropriate, physically with others that we care about in our lives. And sometimes it's literally that simple, like I say, and most of the time. The importance of making those around you know that you love them unconditionally. That's what we say about our children. I know that's tough sometimes, especially with adults who need to be responsible for their own actions and their words, etc. I get all that, and I agree with all of that. At the same time, it's our capacity to love others unconditionally. Not to say that you approve of every behavior. Some things really need to be changed, as you well know, either in their behavior, sometimes even in our own behavior. There are things we definitely need to work on and need to change. But just in general, though, if we're able to establish that trust and then be able to show that person day in, day out, and through the ups and downs, that you love them unconditionally, okay? And that you're willing, no matter what, to take the time to love them, to truly show them that you care about them. And that at times you're willing and able to give them the space, perhaps, that they do need. And yet that you'll also be there to fill in the spaces that are empty from time to time as well. Okay? And then there is this one final issue I just want to mention briefly. I've talked about it previously, and I'll do another vlog soon enough on the issue of gratitude. This is the one thing, like I said, I don't really have any regrets, and I don't lament my life or woe is me or, I had to suffer. We all suffer. We all struggle with life's challenges. But the one thing that I kind of do wish I'd been exposed to or learned more deeply, and not just the dictionary definition or the synonyms for the term gratitude, but truly incorporated that into my life and my deeper understanding of the world around me. Because I think if I had a better understanding and appreciation and ability to express gratitude, then that, among everything else that could have happened, probably would have made the biggest difference in my own life. But it is what it is. We are where we are, and I don't look at this again as a failure. As I'm here, I'm doing my thing. You're doing your thing. We'll be okay. But instead, what I want to do is take a bit of time now in closing today's vlog to express my gratitude. I am truly and deeply thankful for all that I've been afforded in this life, for the people that I've known, for yourselves, for everything about nature and the worlds in which I've lived. But most importantly today, I want to express the gratitude that's probably most obvious for many of us, or that maybe you've expressed quite often in your lives. And that is, or at least in my case, I wanted to express my debt of gratitude to my late mother. Again, I hope some of us, have been able to show that on a regular basis. Maybe many of us continue to do so. Maybe some have been denied the good fortune of having a strong, healthy relationship with a mother. Or even that relationship obviously can have its ups and downs. But I just wanted to express my gratitude for my mother, because my mother, it just so happens, passed away exactly 1 year ago today. That is on February 26th, 2024. And she passed away with my sister Lisa holding her hand. And it truly was her time. And so, in fact, I want to express additional gratitude, especially to my sisters, Lisa and Tricia, who were, kind of the linchpins holding everything together, especially from my mother in her later years. I mean, all of my family members and all of my older brothers, they certainly helped out as best they could in their own ways. But the deepest debt of gratitude I really have is for my sisters, Lisa and Tricia, and all that they did to make my mother's life as comfortable and, keep her as happy and as goofy as she could be right up until the end of her time on this planet. She lived more than 94 years. She got to see all of her children and most of her grandchildren just in the week or so before, 2 weeks before she passed. And I think knowingly or not, everybody got to say their goodbyes in their own ways. And I think my mother / Mimi to the grandchildren knew that she'd basically seen everyone or anybody that could make it. And perhaps in her own way, she was saying goodbye. So I knew she was about to pass based on a phone call. My sister, Lisa, she called me the morning. It was on a Sunday morning. And she said, Joe, I think Mom's really struggling now. I don't know how much longer she's going to be. From the tone of her voice, I could tell that this was it. We were at the end stage, as they say. And so I desperately needed to finish the song that I'd been writing about my mother. I'd started it some years earlier, and I had it mostly finished, or at least 3/4 finished. And I actually had a chance to sing that to her, and I made a joke about it when I saw her the week before. And this is included in a video that I did, so I'll share that another time and have some more to say about mothers in general and so forth. Maybe a good one for Mother's Day. But what I did was I raced. It just came to me right away when Lisa said she thought Mom wasn't going to be around much longer. the words just, again, sort of fell into my lap. And so this is what I wrote just a matter of hours before she passed. And then I was fortunate to be able to FaceTime with my sister and play the song to my mother, the full song, including these last verses, just a matter of hours before she passed. And I'll tell a little bit more about that story another time, but this is what I wrote. And this is the song is called 1929. It's the last song on my album, and it's a song, 1929. This refers to the year in which my mother was born, and it's meant to be an autobiographical song about her life, sung from her perspective. So this is what I wrote on that very last day, from my mother's perspective, and it would have been her way of expressing gratitude in the final verses. So here's what, and these are the final words on my debut album. So here we go. This is my mother singing in her Texas drawl. Well, she didn't have the drawl that my grandmother had. For some of you, you wouldn't have understood my grandmother at all, given her Texan accent. But my mother still had a bit of a Texan accent as well. But here's what she was singing in her final verses, as I imagine them. I've been blessed, a life lived well. What the future holds, who can tell? I was lucky, the munchkins grown, the grandchildren I have known. Caitlin, Lucas, JP, Caleb, Suzanne. Later, Ryan, Cheyenne, Ariane. Changed my name, Mimi I became, rekindled life's eternal flame. My mother passed, then Steve moved back. Having survived his heart attack, I was mom again, late in life, but still I think it's a wonderful life. I've lived almost 100 years, with endless laughter, with joy and tears. The village idiot I am these days, she liked to call herself. I'd like a raft just to float away. And then finally, think of me and say a prayer in your heart with love to share. Smiling down from beyond the blue, you know I'm always there for you. Come what may, our world lives on. Remember me when you hear this song. Laugh and sing, my beautiful birds. I love you all, are my final words. And thus endeth the final song on my debut album. The final line, while obviously not as majestic as the Beatles' final words on their last album, and Abbey Road, and in the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make. But it's still an important line, I think, what I've written. So I love you all are my final words. And so, the Beatles closed their album with A Day in the Life and the End. And I closed my mother's with, if you will, my mother's life in our days, if I can invert the wording a bit, and with gratitude, not for the end, but for all the new beginnings that she spawned in all of us. And so, Mimi, Mom, I love you. We all love you. And we're all grateful for all that you were able to give us in your 94 and a half years. I only saw the last 61 of them or so myself, but thanks for everything that you did for us and tried to do for us as best you could, and who you were. And that's what we love, and that's what we remember, and that's what we take forward. And I am grateful, deeply grateful, to have had the mother that I had and the parents that I had. And so be sure to share that sentiment, that I love you as best you can every day of your life with the people obviously most intimate, most important to you. We all have different people who love us and whom we love. We don't always, especially as guys, and especially, depending on our cultural background, we don't always express that, and we probably should, or spend more time doing that. So, until next time, may you and yours continue to create peace in your lives and nurture that love in your hearts, okay? And give someone a hug, especially who might be hurting or who might need one. I guarantee you, you won't regret it. Be selfish. It'll make you feel better too. All right, until next time, take care. Hope to see you soon.